He had already named the boy Methuselah before the age showed its full face. That is where I want to begin. Not at the end, when people say only that Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him. Not at the high places of vision. Not at the sealed judgments. Begin with a man in a house, with a child in his arms, with dust on the threshold, and evening gathering against the hills. Begin where obedience usually begins, among ordinary tasks, before anyone calls it remarkable. The line from Adam had already grown long enough to sound ancient when spoken aloud. Fathers buried fathers. Names lengthened the memory of the earth. Men measured years by sons and losses, by harvest and burial, by the settling of flocks at dusk. Yet the old simplicity had thinned. The ground still yielded. Children still laughed, and the moon still returned on time. But something in the human gaze had changed. People no longer looked at the world as if it had been given. They looked at it as if it were available. Enoch did not belong to the loud men of his generation. He did not push himself into the center of disputes. He did not sharpen his name against other names. Scripture spares words when it speaks of him, and that restraint matters. A life may be vast before God without becoming public in the eyes of men. Enoch walked with God. It is a small sentence with difficult demands. Walking asks duration. It asks agreement. It asks a pace. One may run after a fear for an hour. One may shout a vow and break it by nightfall. Walking is harder. Walking means the direction holds. So he walked. He walked after the birth of Methuselah. He walked as the years widened around him. He walked while others learned new arts and older cruelties. He walked when trade began to fatten greed and when strength became its own argument. He walked under a sky that still declared order, even as human desire learned to speak in the language of necessity. There is no scene given us of his first prayer, no preserved exchange between him and his household, no list of private virtues. We are left with the mark that mattered most. He walked with God. Stay here a breath. That sentence is too often polished until it loses weight. It was not written for embroidery. It was written against a darkening world. Around him, people married, bargained, boasted, raised pillars, measured territories, remembered injuries, and passed grudges like inheritance. Songs were sung, and some of them were clean. Bread was broken, and some of it was shared honestly. The age was not made of one color only. Judgment does not fall because every act is equally vile. It falls because a people learns to bless what is twisted and call the bending wisdom. That was the wound spreading through the generations. Men did not stumble only in weakness. They decorated rebellion. They taught it. They improved it. Later tradition would remember Enoch as one who saw beyond his own hour, one who received the hidden architecture of a moral universe men had stopped fearing. But even before one speaks of visions, the man must stand. The house must hold. The feet must go on in one direction. Otherwise, heaven speaks to vanity, and prophecy becomes ornament. He fathered sons and daughters. He lived under the same sun as everyone else. He watched graves open for others. He knew that flesh weakens, that crops fail, that children cough in the night, that promises strain under delay. The difference was not that he escaped the human lot. The difference was that he would not let the age tutor his soul. And the age was becoming eager for new teachers. There are old traditions, preserved in the first Book of Enoch, that speak of heavenly watchers appointed over the world who did not keep their proper place. Scripture itself, in Genesis, says little and says enough. The sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and the earth filled with corruption. Later readers have wrestled with those words. Some take them one way, some another. The ancient Enochic reading hears in them a rebellion from above that hastened ruin below. Whether one follows every contour of that tradition or keeps closer to the spare line of Genesis, the moral center is plain. Boundaries were despised. Desire refused restraint. Power reached where it had not been given leave to go. Enoch lived near the seam where that breach would tear open. Perhaps he heard first as rumor. Men always do. A whisper on a trade path. A shepherd returning from northern slopes with a story he cannot tell cleanly because he does not understand what he has seen. Strange figures on the heights. Oaths taken under cloud. Women chosen as if they were spoils. Knowledge offered without fear of consequence. Tools altering hands faster than wisdom could govern them. Ornament becoming seduction. Weapon becoming prestige. Secrets no one had learned through patient labor appearing all at once in the settlements of men. A righteous man does not need full information to know when the air has changed. He feels it in speech before he sees it in law. He sees it in the manner sons answer fathers, in the ease with which laughter turns cruel, in the appetite for novelty when reverence begins to look old. Enoch kept walking. That matters because judgment stories are never only about the judged. They are also about those who remained faithful while the rot spread. If there had been no steady men, the darkness would have seemed natural. If there had been no witness, corruption would have named itself fate. Enoch stood in his generation as a contradiction. He did not halt the violence by force. He did not outshout the ambitious. He did not seize the age by the throat and drag it back to its first obedience. He did something the proud despise because they cannot imitate it. He kept company with God, and because he did, when the time came for heaven to speak plainly into earth's confusion, the word did not fall on a stranger. On Hermon, the old tradition names the mountain Hermon, a height of wind, stone, and oath. There the watchers, as the ancient book tells it, came down in a company, not in isolation. That detail cuts close to the nerve of evil. Shared rebellion gives courage to those who would not dare alone. One speaks the desire, another fears the cost. A third proposes a vow, so none may retreat without shame. Sin likes witnesses when it means to make itself permanent. They looked upon the daughters of men, and desire crossed its boundary. In the Enochic telling, and their leader feared that he alone would bear blame if the plan failed, so they bound themselves under mutual imprecation. None would turn back. None would abandon the others to judgment. What was first lust hardened into covenant. That is often how corruption grows strongest. Appetite becomes agreement. Agreement becomes structure. Structure demands defense, and defense calls itself honor. The oath was brief. The wound was not. The world below did not at first know what had been pledged above it. Villages still woke to common duties. Water still had to be drawn. Animals still had to be penned before dusk. Yet decisions made in hidden places always seek bodies in open places. Before long, the effects appeared. Women were taken into unions that bore more than scandal. From those transgressions came the mighty ones of old, the men of renown, and in the Enochic tradition, the giants whose hunger outgrew field and flock and finally turned toward flesh itself. I speak carefully here because the biblical text is short and the tradition is expansive. But even at the point where certainty narrows, the moral line does not blur. A created order was violated. Those set for service reached for rule. Those meant to guard instead despoiled. The descent was not an act of romance, it was an act of theft. The ancient book remembers names: Asael, Semjaza, and others numbered among the rebellious host. Asael is said to have taught men the making of weapons, and women the arts of adornment made sharp for seduction. Some readers take these lists as symbolic descriptions of corruption entering culture through forbidden channels. Others receive them more literally, as the catalogue of heavenly treason. In either reading, the point stands: knowledge severed from obedience becomes a blade in impatient hands. It is a poor kind of wisdom that enlarges ability while starving conscience. Think of the settlements then. Bronze glinting where wood once served. Eyes lingering on the new edges. Men feeling a fierce pleasure in objects that could pierce farther, tear deeper, intimidate sooner. Think of mirrors polished for vanity, pigments set upon skin, metal worked into signs of status. None of these things are evil merely by existing. Scripture is not frightened by craftsmanship. The tabernacle itself would one day gleam with holy artistry. The corruption lay elsewhere. Gifts entered a heart already inclined to grasp, and there they found welcome. Technique outran reverence. Skill stepped out from under worship and hired itself to appetite. The children born in the wake of this rebellion came to embody its scale. Genesis calls them Nephilim and mighty men of old, men of renown. Renown. Hear the sorrow in that word. Human communities are quick to admire what devours them. A violent man gathers stories around himself. Parents warn children not to cross his path, then speak his name with a trace of awe. Crowds love power long before they learn to hate its cost. The earth was filling with people who could no longer tell the difference between greatness and magnitude. Enoch, if he saw the beginnings as the old tradition suggests, would not have mistaken spectacle for blessing. A monstrous age often arrives dressed as enlargement. It boasts of what is newly possible. It flatters the restless. It tells ordinary men that limits are insults and old commands belong to a smaller world. The Watchers did not offer decay in the language of decay. They offered it in the language of ascent. That is why corruption gains disciples. There is a reason mountains recur in stories of revelation and rebellion alike. Heights expose the heart. From below, men look up and imagine purity. From above, some begin to imagine exemption. Hermon, in this tradition, becomes the scene of a dreadful inversion. The place where beings associated with watchfulness cease to watch over and instead reach down to possess. The posture of service folds inward. The gaze turns from stewardship to appetite. And yet, heaven was not confused. The God who formed lights and seasons did not discover rebellion too late. Delay is not ignorance. Patience is not consent. The men of that age may have thought strength was consolidating. The Watchers themselves may have believed their oath had made retreat impossible and judgment remote. But every vow spoken against the order of God carries its own witness. Heaven does not need informants. It hears the moral shape of speech. Enoch still walked in that world. He walked under skies that saw everything. He walked among neighbors who may have thought him severe or old-fashioned, or merely unspectacular. A righteous life rarely looks urgent to those addicted to transgression. They notice it only when judgment begins to validate what it had quietly declared all along. The mountain kept its name. The oath kept its stain. The earth below began to learn consequences it had not chosen in full, though it welcomed them in part. And somewhere in the tightening dark, a man who feared God would soon be called to look at more than any man should wish to see. The weight of giant footsteps. Violence does not remain in the hands that invent it. It spreads by admiration, imitation, necessity, and fear. A man learns the new hardness because his neighbor has learned it first. A village arms because another village boasts of its strong men. A father who hates the age still teaches his son a cruel skill because he cannot bear the thought of burying him. Corruption becomes ordinary not when everyone loves it, but when enough people decide they must live with it. So the earth filled. The Enochic tradition speaks of giants who consumed the labor of men, and, when fields no longer answered their hunger, turned upon beasts and then upon people. Whether one reads those images as literal memory, moral apocalypse, or a mingling of both, the picture is plain enough to recognize. Appetite unruled becomes devouring. Those who are meant to protect prey upon the weak. The mighty do not stop at abundance. Abundance teaches them scale, and scale asks for more. Markets changed. Songs changed. Mothers learned to hush children at the mention of certain roads. Men traveled armed and still traveled afraid. The language of necessity thickened around every bargain. A strong household might survive by compromising once, then twice, then as often as survival required. Soon people no longer remembered where the surrender began. Genesis says the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Those are terrible words, but they are not the language of sudden collapse. They describe saturation. The corruption had sunk beneath acts and entered imagination. People rehearsed evil before performing it. They prepared it inwardly. They trained desire toward it. The heart became workshop before the hands became instrument. When that happens, public order cannot save a people. Law may delay a wound. It cannot heal affection bent toward ruin. Enoch saw a generation becoming teachable to darkness. He would have watched boys admire brutal men because brutal men seemed unanswerable. He would have watched women calculate safety inside a world arranged by predation. He would have watched elders go quiet when speech cost too much. He would have seen altars tended by hands that had already agreed to hidden filth. There is a grief particular to the righteous in such an age. They are not surprised by human frailty. Scripture had never promised innocence after Eden. What breaks them is the speed with which people begin calling rot a new order. Do not rush past that grief. It is one of the holiest forms of sanity. For there comes a point when the person who still mourns evil appears unreasonable to those who have adapted. They say he lacks realism. They say he does not understand the times. They say his obedience is private, respectable perhaps, but of no use against the machinery now governing events. Yet the one who keeps mourning has not failed to understand the age. He is refusing to be educated by it. This was Enoch's hidden battle, not to resist one visible tyrant only, but to resist the inward schooling of a corrupt world. Every day required choices too small for chronicles and too weighty for heaven to ignore. He had to speak without mimicry. He had to judge without vanity. He had to love wife and children without turning family into excuse for compromise. He had to stand near men who were growing coarse and remain uncoarsened. That is costly holiness. It is not theatrical. It leaves no monument. Yet entire generations depend on someone practicing it somewhere. The ancient tradition says Enoch also proclaimed judgment. The Epistle of Jude preserves words associated with him. Behold, the the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment on all. That sentence does not sound like a man dazzled by secret things. It sounds like a man who had looked long enough at evil to know that delay cannot mean indifference forever. Still, the flood did not arrive that afternoon. Fire did not split the mountain, and the giants did not fall in a single hour. People married, planted, mocked, schemed, boasted, and slept. Children were born into the wrong century and smiled anyway. Old women still kneaded dough. Lambs still startled at sudden noise. The ordinary and the monstrous shared the same roads. That is why judgment is hard to believe before it appears. People confuse continuance with approval. Enoch did not. He knew the difference between a world still upheld by God and a world at peace with God. The same mercy that lets crops rise for the wicked also stores testimony against them. Every sunrise offered to the violent is both gift and witness. Every day granted to a corrupt people increases either repentance or evidence. Men prefer to hear only the softness in patience. They do not notice the ledgers it fills. By then, the name of Noah had likely begun to matter within Enoch's own house. Bloodlines were not abstractions to ancient people. Grandsons were future burdens and future mercies. The line that would continue through the flood was already hidden inside the family tree, though not yet revealed in full. Enoch's life stood nearer to Noah than ours can feel by reading names in sequence. These were not distant symbols to him. They were kin. History had faces, and the burden of sight was moving toward him. The man summoned upward. There are moments when a life spent in faithful obscurity is brought to a threshold it did not seek. Enoch did not climb into revelation by curiosity. That distinction is vital. The old tradition does not present him as a collector of forbidden brilliance, one more man intoxicated by hidden things. It presents him as called. Heaven speaks differently to the hungry for power than it does to the one who has learned reverence in silence. The summons, as the ancient text tells it, carried him into scenes no human village could tutor him to understand. Fiery presences, holy ones, chambers of judgment, places where the moral architecture of creation stood visible and terrible. He was shown not merely marvels, but correspondences. What men do below has meaning above. Oaths on mountains are not local events. Blood on earth speaks. Pride thickens the air. The rebellion of watchers and the corruption of men were already inscribed in a larger order. In some tellings, Enoch is approached because the fallen ones seek a mediator. In others, his visionary journey expands before that plea is settled. The exact sequence matters less here than the inward demand common to all. He must see without being destroyed by what he sees. He must hear with clean ears in a realm where every word weighs more than stone. A person who has never trembled at holiness will misunderstand these visions. He will turn them into spectacle, as if heaven exists to satisfy the appetite for strangeness. But the nearer one draws to divine order, the less ornamental it becomes. Fire is no decoration there. Thrones are not props. Books are not symbols chosen for color. Everything bears moral density. Every created thing stands where it belongs. Every rebellious thing is known for what it is. Nothing flatters the viewer. I think this is why Enoch matters so much to later readers living in confused times. He represents a man taught to see the world again from above its lies. On earth, violence had acquired prestige. In the heavenly court, it had weight. On earth, knowledge without obedience looked like advancement. In the presence of the Holy One, it looked like theft. On earth, delay let sinners think themselves secure. In the divine order, Delay was simply the measured distance between deed and unveiled consequence. There is mercy even in that distance. Hear me carefully. Judgment delayed is not judgment denied, but neither is it mere suspense for the righteous. It creates room for repentance, room for witness, room for Noah to build, room for the faithful to endure without becoming the thing they condemn. A world judged the instant it erred would never know covenant patience. A world never judged at all would never know moral truth. Enoch is made to stand where both realities burn together. The vision of the Holy One in 1st Enoch is not sentimental. The language reaches for whiteness, fire, innumerable attendants, unapproachable majesty. The point is not visual abundance for its own sake. The point is severity joined to purity. The judge of all the earth is not improvising goodness. He is goodness, and therefore rebellion cannot be made harmless by passage of time. Men sometimes imagine that age itself softens guilt. It does not. It only buries it deeper among consequences. And Enoch, this man of few biblical words, was given words to carry back. Some ancient readers linger over his role as scribe. That image fits him. The faithful are often made scribes of grief before they become heralds of hope. He must write what others do not want written. He must preserve names under sentence. He must witness the fall of beings who once stood in places of service. He must record not only that sin brings ruin, but how ruin unfolds through desire, knowledge, pride, and blood. Precision matters in judgment. God is never vague because he lacks evidence. There is another burden here, quieter and sharper. Enoch sees more than his neighbors can bear. Such sight isolates. A man who knows the age is under sentence cannot join its laughter easily. He may still love. He may still eat with others, bless children, mourn the sick, tend the work of his house. Yet a distance enters. He has heard the moral interpretation of ordinary life, and that knowledge presses on even the smallest scenes. Bread tastes different when one knows the earth is grieving under human violence. The cry of an infant at night sounds different when one has seen chambers where the dead await division. Hold that image a little longer. Holiness does not make a man less human. It makes him unable to call darkness normal. So Enoch returned, in the logic of the tradition, not as an owner of secrets, but as a servant under commission. He is shown because he must speak. He is burdened because others are sleeping. He is entrusted because he has not trained his heart to misuse what is holy. This is the opposite of the watcher's fall. They grasped knowledge against order. Enoch receives knowledge under obedience. Their descent multiplies corruption. His ascent deepens witness. When he speaks of judgment, then, he is not a zealot feeding on collapse. He is a man who has seen what the age refuses to admit. Creation is not loose. History is not loose. Desire is not loose. Men may live as if consequences can be postponed forever, but the universe itself does not agree. And the more Enoch sees, the more one thing becomes impossible for him to miss. Even while the earth is unraveling, the heavens are not in disorder. That contrast will break his heart before it steadies it. Storehouses. One of the oldest astonishments in the Enochic tradition is not the punishment of rebels or the terror of fiery courts. It is order. Enoch is shown the courses of lights, the chambers of winds, the treasuries of thunder and hail, the appointed paths by which sun and moon pass through their gates. To many modern ears, this sounds merely ancient, a cosmology from another age, yet the spiritual force of it remains. The vision insists that creation is governed. There are measures. There are boundaries. There are obediences written into things that never boast of keeping them. The stars do not seek promotion. The sun does not improvise its route. The moon does not despise its own appointed waxing and waning. This matters because Enoch lives among creatures who do precisely those things in moral form. Men want more than place. They want self-definition without gift. The Watchers, in the old account, wanted proximity without submission. They wanted exchange without permission. They wanted capacity without worship. Against that fever of self-assertion stands a cosmos in ordered praise. The tradition's interest in a 364-day calendar belongs here. Readers have debated its meaning and historical use, and one must speak without false certainty. But in the literary and theological world of First Enoch, the calendar is not trivia. It is a sign that time itself is not wild. Days are not a swamp in which men drown blindly. Seasons answer command. The movement of heaven does not consult human mood. While cities below bargain with lies, dawn still arrives by decree. There is comfort in that, though not a cheap one. For order in creation does not flatter the disordered soul. It indicts it. If stars keep rank and humans refuse, then rebellion is exposed not as freedom, but as refusal to be what one is under God. The heavens become testimony. Every recurrence of morning is a quiet accusation against moral chaos. Every returning season says, "Law is not your enemy. Law is the song by which life holds." Enoch sees this and must carry it back into a society drunk on excess. He cannot tell them only that judgment is coming. He must tell them why judgment is just. The flood will not be divine temper. It will be moral surgery on a world whose wounds have gone septic. The same Lord who appoints the courses of lights also sets bounds for creatures made in his image. When those bounds are despised, disorder does not become noble by persistence. It becomes ripe. There is a tenderness hidden inside these cosmic visions too. People speak as though divine order is cold, but only the cruel think boundaries are enemies. A child survives because sea and shore are not one thing. Seed yields because seasons are not random. Love endures because fidelity has form. The command of God is not a cage dropped into creation from outside. It is the grammar by which creation remains itself. That is why the Enochic world lingers over gates, measures, appointed turns, named forces. It is teaching by contrast. Human society had become swollen with improvisation against God. Heaven had not moved an inch. And Enoch, standing between those realms, learns a hard consolation. The ruin of his age is real, but it is not ultimate. Disorder can spread across a generation. It cannot rewrite the foundations. Men can corrupt their own bloodlines, fill fields with violence, teach vanity, forge weapons, and crown the mighty. They cannot unmake morning. They cannot bribe the stars into lawlessness. They cannot persuade the Holy One to treat appetite as ordinance. There are times when the righteous survive chiefly by remembering this, not by denying corruption, not by pretending the age is healthier than it is, by remembering that chaos remains parasitic. It has no roots of its own. It can only spoil what was first given in goodness. That means evil, for all its noise, is derivative. It can wound. It can spread. It can terrify children and weary saints. It cannot found a universe. So when Enoch looks upon the ordered heavens, he is not being distracted from the crisis below. He is being taught the scale on which the crisis must be understood. Human rebellion is dreadful precisely because the world was not made for it. Judgment is necessary precisely because the world has a true shape. Hope is reasonable precisely because God has not abandoned his own design. By the time he descends from such vision to the ordinary earth, even the daily sky must look changed to him. Not more beautiful only, more judicial, more faithful. The dawn no longer says merely that another day has started. It says the Creator has not resigned. And because he has not resigned, the dead also are not forgotten. The hollow places, the living bury with haste because the body compels speed. The soul does not move as quickly. In the Enochic visions, there are places prepared for the dead, divided regions of waiting, marked distinctions between the righteous and the violent, between the unavenged and the condemned, between those whose story is not finished and those already tasting the edge of sentence. The details are apocalyptic and should be handled with care. Not every image means to function as architecture, yet the governing conviction is steady and grave. Death does not dissolve moral reality. Enoch is shown hollow places in the earth, or chambers of separation. He hears voices. He learns that blood unjustly spilled has not vanished into ground without witness. This echoes the older cry from Genesis, when Abel's blood called from the soil. The earth is not mute under violence. It remembers. This is one reason the flood generation stands under such dreadful indictment. Their crimes were not private sins evaporating at death. They had entered the structure of creation. The poor carry the aftershock of the strong. The dead wait under unresolved wrong. Graves are not levelers in the way cynics suppose. Burial hides bodies. It does not settle truth. For the righteous, this vision is severe comfort. Severe because it strips away the pleasant lie that injustice somehow corrects itself by passing out of sight. Comfort because it means the unrighted wound is still held within divine knowledge. There are mothers who die with grief unanswered. There are men whose blood sinks into dust under the feet of their killers. There are generations that receive no earthly vindication. If death were silence in the absolute sense, the moral universe would be a fraud. Enoch is shown that it is not. Some of the ancient descriptions speak of bright places of peace and dark places of confinement. Some later interpreters have read these scenes alongside other biblical passages on Sheol, Hades, Paradise, and final judgment, though one should avoid flattening distinct traditions into one map. Better to say this: Enoch is taught that the dead await in distinction, not confusion. God loses no person into generality. He knows the faithful by name and the oppressor by deed. That would have mattered to a man living under giant shadows. Tyranny seeks to create emotional amnesia. It wants the weak to believe that once the powerful have killed, the story belongs to them forever. Heaven denies that claim. The murdered are not erased. The arrogant are not unrecorded. The hidden act enters a hidden ledger. The shout on earth is answered by a silence above that is not empty, only patient. There is also warning here for anyone fascinated by the strange more than the holy. Many are drawn to Enoch because he seems to open doors into secret worlds. Yet the door he opens most insistently is moral. Even the underworld scenes do not exist to satisfy curiosity. They exist to intensify accountability. If there are chambers of waiting, then choices made in daylight do not die at sundown. If the dead remain distinguished, then righteousness and wickedness were never temporary costumes. They were trajectories. Enoch must carry that knowledge back among the living. He must look into the faces of men who dine, boast, bargain, and sleep as if the grave were a blur, and know that the grave is a threshold under governance. Such knowing does not make one dramatic. It usually makes one quiet. Words are used more carefully after that. Promises too. A short silence belongs here. The dead are not beyond God. That is enough to steady one age and to terrify another. The tradition later turns Enoch's sight toward final judgment and the vindication of the righteous. But before those heights come fully into view, one thing has already been fixed in him. History carries consequence past the horizon of visible life. The flood, then, will not be the whole answer. It will be a temporal judgment within a larger reckoning. Waters may cleanse the earth of a generation's violence. They do not replace the final distinction between those who belong to God and those who harden themselves against Him. So Enoch learns to speak of the future without cheapening the present. The coming judgment does not excuse current faithfulness, it requires it. The afterlife is not an escape hatch for the righteous imagination. It is the assurance that obedience in a crooked age is not wasted, even when it is not rewarded on earth. The chambers of waiting mean that God's justice can move at scales men cannot monitor. He is under no pressure to compress all meaning into one public hour. And still the public hour was approaching. Its first sign would not be thunder, but timber. Noah under timber dust. Before the flood was a horizon, it was an instruction. The ancient world did not wake one morning to waves already over the hills. A man received a word and began to work. He cut wood. He measured. He fitted. He repeated motions that would have looked absurd if the warning behind them were false. Noah, preserved later as a herald of righteousness, enters this story not as a hero of instant deliverance, but as a worker under ridicule and strain. Enoch, according to Genesis, does not remain on earth to see the flood itself. He is taken before it comes. Yet the line between them is close, and the burden of witness passes through kinship as much as proclamation. The world that mocked Noah had already refused Enoch. The same moral weather lay over both men. One announced judgment and was taken. The other built under judgment and was preserved through it. Think of Noah in the yard, not first on the waters. Think of timber dust on his arms. Think of neighbors slowing as they pass, offering half-laughing questions with sharp edges under them. Think of sons learning the shape of obedience from tasks that make no social sense. Faith is rarely more exposed than when it takes visible form before vindication arrives. People can tolerate private conviction. They become restless when conviction starts altering measurements. Perhaps old stories about Enoch lingered in Noah's hearing. Perhaps a grandfather's name carried both honor and embarrassment in public talk. That is how generations often receive the righteous dead, with respect cleansed of obedience. Their memory is admired precisely where it no longer threatens. Noah could not afford that luxury. If Enoch had spoken of coming judgment, then Noah's hammer answered it. The flood tradition in Genesis is morally direct. Human wickedness had become great. The earth was corrupt in God's sight. Violence filled it. Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Those sentences draw a line no sophistication improves upon. Judgment and grace appear side by side. The same God who resolves to blot out a corrupted order also preserves a man and his house by covenant mercy. That dual motion matters for understanding the Enochic world as well. The visions are full of sentence, but never of sentence alone. There is always a remnant logic, a preserving logic, a future held through devastation. God does not cleanse the earth because he has abandoned his purposes in it. He cleanses because he has not. Noah's work became the public contradiction of his age. Every beam raised was a rebuke to casual unbelief. Every joined plank said that warning had entered matter. The people around him likely had reasons ready. Seasons looked stable. Trade routes still functioned. Children were marrying. Fields still answered effort. The world gave no immediate visual confirmation of catastrophe. That is the ordinary setting of faithfulness. One acts on a word that has not yet been ratified by events. The ungodly often call that foolishness because they cannot distinguish patience from absence. Yet here is the deeper sting. Noah's task was not merely practical, it was relational. His sons had to remain with him. Their wives had to enter the same obedience. A man may endure ridicule alone more easily than he can watch it brush against those he loves. The family becomes the testing ground of conviction. Did they believe enough to stay near the woodpile? Did they continue when progress looked slow and weather stayed ordinary? Scripture does not indulge our curiosity with household dialogues, but every large obedience contains them. Enoch, taken earlier, still belongs in this chapter because the story of the flood begins before the rain. It begins when a righteous line refuses to forget that God has spoken. There is continuity between walking with God and cutting the first beam. The faithful do not always receive the same assignment. One walks, one prophesies, one writes, one builds, one enters the ark, one dies before the waters. The obedience differs, the allegiance does not, and the corruption of the age sharpened around that obedience. The more visible Noah's labor became, and the more the world had to decide what to do with testimony it could see. A spoken warning may be dismissed as mood. A vessel growing on dry land is harder to wave away. The ark rose like an argument. When later writers connect the ancient world, the flood, and the angels who sinned, as 2 Peter does, they remind us that the catastrophe was not local weather answering local vice. It was the judgment of a world morally intertwined from heaven's rebellion to human violence. The depths above and below were not mere natural forces waiting to be released. They were instruments under command. Once again, order. Once again, measured wrath. Even the deluge would not be chaos in the final sense. It would be obedience in water. Noah kept working. And elsewhere, before the sentence fell, Enoch was being drawn into one of the hardest tasks ever given a righteous man, to carry the petition of the condemned. The petition for the fallen. There are requests one can hardly bear to hear because the answer is already in them. The old Enochic tradition says the Watchers, after their sin and the devastation that followed from it, asked Enoch to intercede for them. He, the righteous scribe, must write their petition and carry it upward. The irony is cutting. Those who overstepped divine order now seek help from the man who honored it. Those who despised limits now long for mercy after consequence has matured. They do not ascend on their own behalf. They send the one who had not fallen. This scene, whether read devotionally, literarily, or historically within the tradition, opens a wound no serious reader should close too quickly. Even rebels want an advocate once judgment ceases to be theoretical. Desire is bold while consequence is distant. It becomes eloquent when chains appear. There is no hint that Enoch gloats. That matters. The righteous are not licensed to enjoy another's collapse. He writes, he bears, he waits. To stand near holiness is to lose the taste for vindictive theatre. Still, compassion is not the same as confusion. The petition can be carried without being believed. The tears of the guilty may be real and still fail to alter the sentence. What would it mean to write such a plea? To set down words for beings whose rebellion had spilled into human blood, whose transgression had helped deform an age, whose offspring or influence had magnified violence on the earth. It would mean that righteousness sometimes serves truth by carrying even the doomed into the light where judgment becomes explicit. Enoch's mediation here is not redemptive in the sense of overturning verdict. It is revelatory. The request is heard, and the refusal itself becomes part of the moral order. The answer, as the tradition gives it, is devastating. The watchers will receive no peace. They will watch the destruction tied to their sin. They will be bound until the appointed judgment. Their petition returns not as pardon, but as confirmation of sentence. In other words, heaven does not confuse regret under penalty with repentance that yields restoration. Men dislike such clarity. They want every grief to count as innocence. They want every plea to erase history. But a universe without durable moral distinction would be a universe where the weak have no defender. If rebellion from above, violence below, corruption of knowledge, and devouring pride can all end in easy amnesty merely because fear has finally entered the guilty heart, then justice itself has no spine. The Enochic refusal is stern because the wound was vast. There is another layer still. Enoch, by carrying the rejected petition, becomes a living contrast to the fallen beings themselves. He goes where he is sent. They went where they seized. He writes under commission. They taught without leave. He stands in holy places trembling. They crossed holy boundaries grasping. Their whole story is misdirected ascent, followed by forced humiliation. His is humble walking, followed by God's own taking. The tradition is not subtle on this point. True exaltation is received, never stolen. This chapter also helps explain why Enochic literature lingered in the imagination of communities facing oppression, compromise, and delay. It dares to say that some corruptions are too deep for soft language. There are pleas heaven hears and denies. There are powers beyond negotiation. There are moments when the righteous must stop seeking explanations that preserve the dignity of evil and instead receive the dignity of judgment. That is not cruelty. It is moral adulthood. And yet even here mercy remains in strange form. The petition is answered. The rebels are not ignored as if their existence had slipped off the map of God. Sentence itself is a kind of acknowledgement, terrible and exact. To be judged is to be taken seriously as a moral being. The abyss is not forgetfulness. The chains of gloomy darkness, echoed later in 2 Peter, are not evidence that heaven has become indifferent. They are evidence that heaven has acted. This is painful wisdom for human history as well. There are social evils that cannot be reasoned into goodness because their root is rebellion, not misunderstanding. There are structures so braided with appetite and pride that reform touching only the surface leaves the poison intact. The generation before the flood learned that too late. They lived under powers and patterns that had already crossed from temptation into ripened corruption. What remained was witness, warning, and the patience of God preparing both ark and sentence. Enoch emerges from this task lonelier, I think, though the text does not say it in those plain words. How could he not? To carry a plea for the damned and return with denial is to learn something irreversible about holiness. It teaches the soul that goodness is not softness. It teaches the heart that love and judgment are not opposites in God. It teaches the witness that one may speak truthfully about mercy without lying about wrath. If you feel the pressure of that, you are reading correctly. The age around him still laughed, traded, multiplied, and bruised itself against its own lusts. The watchers still stood under sentence. Noah still worked. The dead still waited in their divisions. The heavens still kept their courses. And Enoch was given yet another vision by which to understand the long story of God with man. He was shown time gathered into weeks. Weeks. Apocalyptic literature has a way of compressing centuries until they feel like strokes laid by one hand. In the Apocalypse of Weeks, an early section within the Enochic tradition, history is arranged into periods, each marked by corruption, righteousness, violence, judgment, and eventual renewal. The scheme is difficult, debated, and ancient, and I will not pretend a certainty the text itself has inspired readers to examine from several angles. But its force is unmistakable. Human history is not a heap. It unfolds under appointment. This would have mattered deeply to those who felt trapped inside a wicked age. Corruption always tries to make itself appear final. It says, "This is simply how the world is." It says, "Your grief changes nothing." It says, "Every generation becomes this in time, and so call it maturity and endure it without protest." The vision of weeks shatters that spell. An era is an era, not eternity. Violence occupies time. It does not own time. Enoch, seeing history in such measure, would understand his own generation differently. The rise of the Watchers' rebellion, the flood to come, the preservation of the righteous, the later struggles of a chosen people, the eventual judgment of oppressors, the final renewal of creation. All of it stands within a pattern that does not erase human responsibility and yet does not surrender ultimate meaning to human chaos. There is comfort in sequence, not because it makes suffering small, but because it prevents suffering from becoming absolute. Men in prosperous corruption tend to despise this kind of vision. They prefer immediacy. They want the age to be self-explanatory. They want no unseen hand organizing consequence beyond the horizon of their appetite. But the faithful often live by a larger clock. They sow in one week and see fruit in another. They are humiliated in one generation and vindicated in one not yet born. They die with promises still unfinished and are not therefore deceived. The framework of weeks also rebukes impatience in the righteous. If history is measured, then one cannot demand final resolution on a private timetable. Enoch learns to speak of judgment without becoming frantic. He knows there is an appointed end to violence, but he also knows that God lets periods ripen to their proper exposure. Some wickedness must mature before it can be seen for what it is by all. Some deliverances must wait until the remnant is refined enough to receive them without pride. That does not make delay easy, it makes it meaningful. A burdened soul often asks for closure when what heaven gives first is clarity. Enoch receives clarity in abundance. He is shown where the story is headed, but he must still inhabit the ache of the middle. That is a familiar burden to every faithful generation. We know enough to refuse despair, and not enough to stop mourning. We know the arc bends toward judgment and renewal, yet we still bury our dead in unresolved seasons. The vision of weeks does not remove that ache, it sanctifies it. In this light, the flood becomes 1 week's decisive cut, not the whole drama. The giants are not the final enemy. The violent are not the last rulers. Even the language of men of renown shrivels under such perspective. Renown lasts a week. Righteousness, however hidden, belongs to the end. Perhaps that is why Enoch could bear so much sight without being swallowed by it. He was not asked to carry disconnected terrors. He was shown ordered stages. Judgment fits somewhere. Mercy fits somewhere. The faithful remnant fits somewhere. The final cleansing fits somewhere. This does not reduce pain, but it rescues the witness from chaos of mind. He can speak because the story is coherent under God. And once history is seen as measured, another vision becomes possible. The dream in which entire peoples, rulers, saints, and enemies appear under the figures of animals and shepherds. There, the long conflict is told with the sharpness of symbol, not to obscure truth, to unveil it. Beasts in the field. There are times when symbol tells the truth more nakedly than chronicle. In the so-called animal apocalypse of 1st Enoch, human history appears under the forms of bulls, sheep, beasts, birds, and shepherds. Israel and the nations, oppressors and faithful ones, false rulers and appointed overseers, move across the field in a dream that is both strange and cruelly lucid. The point is not whimsy, it is exposure. Strip men of titles, uniforms, and claims, and their moral shape becomes easier to see. Predators look different when called predators. The dream gathers many ages, not only the generation before the flood. Yet it belongs in Enoch's burden because it extends the same conviction. History is seen from above without the disguises by which power justifies itself. Those who ravage the flock may call themselves guardians. Heaven may mark them as wolves. Those entrusted with care may become negligent shepherds. The sheep may seem weak, scattered, easy to erase. Yet the Lord of the sheep does not lose count. This matters for the theological center of the Enochic world. Evil is never only private appetite. It scales upward into structures, rulers, empires, and false custodianship. The Watcher's rebellion is one expression of that principle. Later tyrannies are another. Oppression often changes clothing while keeping its appetite. Symbol lets the text say so without being trapped in one century. For the faithful, the dream offers both warning and steadiness. Warning, because not every shepherd is trustworthy. Leadership itself can be judged. Offices do not sanctify corruption. The powerful within the covenant people are no safer from scrutiny than the enemies outside it. This is one of the harsh mercies of biblical and Enochic thought alike. God does not protect his own name by flattering bad rulers who claim to serve him. He exposes them first. Steadiness, because the sheep are not merely victims wandering in a godless landscape. They are seen. Their injuries are counted. Their scattering is not invisible. The dream suggests that long periods of confusion among the chosen do not annul their election. Discipline may come. False shepherds may be removed. Beasts may ravage for a season. Still, the field belongs to the Lord, not to its most violent animals. Enoch, taught by this vision, would understand that the flood generation was not an isolated horror disconnected from all later history. It was an early outbreak of a recurring pattern. Trust betrayed, power unruled, the vulnerable consumed, judgment delayed, then finally unveiled. That pattern repeats in different forms across the ages. So does mercy. So does remnant faithfulness. So does the divine refusal to let predation define the final shape of the world. There is a line of hope running beneath the dream, though it does not come cheaply. The sheep are not told to pretend the beasts are harmless. Deliverance is not achieved by renaming wolves as misunderstood companions. The dream keeps moral distinctions sharp. Peace, when it comes after judgment, not instead of it. That is one reason the vision remains spiritually bracing. It refuses sentimental reconciliation with evil. Men often crave a peace that costs nothing from the oppressor, except a change in tone. God aims deeper. He means to end the teeth. This is where the Enochic material reaches toward later biblical expectations of final reckoning. The proud are brought down, the righteous are raised, hidden loyalties are disclosed, the field is cleared for a renewed order. In some readers' minds, this resonates with the Son of Man imagery found in the similitudes of Enoch, and, more broadly though distinctly, with the language of Daniel and the Gospels. One must speak with care because traditions overlap without becoming identical. Yet the expectation of a coming judge, vindicating the faithful and humbling the exalted, stands in powerful continuity. Enoch's own role within all this remains striking. He is not the judge, he is the witness. He is not the redeemer, he is the recorder and herald. This humility preserves the script from fantasy. The man who sees most still occupies a creature's place. He bears revelation, he does not originate it. In that way, his life stands as rebuke to every generation tempted to use spiritual insight as self-enthronement. By now, the story has moved far from one household under evening light, yet it has not left that household behind. The same man who once held his son and watched ordinary shadows lengthen is now carrying the symbolic weight of nations and ages. That expansion is not a departure from obedience. It is what obedience prepared him for. Those who are faithful in the unremarked place may be trusted with larger burdens because they have not trained themselves to seek them. And beyond beasts, shepherds, weeks, and judgments, Enoch is granted one more horizon, not merely the defeat of corruption, but the shape of the renewed dwelling of God with the faithful. After sentence, a city. After grief, a spring. 12 gates open. The end Enoch sees is not chaos perfected, it is peace established. This matters because apocalyptic minds are often caricatured as if they can imagine only collapse. But the Enochic tradition, for all its fire and sentence, does not finish in rubble. It turns toward renewal. Some later summaries speak of a city with open gates, a central holy place, living water, brightness without threat, and a field no longer owned by beasts. The imagery stands in kinship with prophetic and later biblical hopes, though each text carries its own music. The common note is unmistakable. God's judgment aims toward a cleansed order in which righteousness can dwell unharmed. 12 gates. The image itself breathes hospitality under holiness. Not a city barricaded in panic, not a kingdom exhausted by permanent war, not a sanctuary guarded because corruption still negotiates at the threshold. Open gates imply security that does not need performance. The danger has been dealt with. The enemies are no longer within bargaining distance of the heart of things. At the center, a holy dwelling. From it, life. Around it, people rightly ordered. Such a vision answers the whole earlier story. The Watchers crossed bounds and defiled what was not theirs. The final city restores bounds without fear. The giants devoured the labor of the earth. The renewed place receives abundance without predation. The violent filled history with renown. The faithful inherit peace without needing fame. The rebellious taught knowledge without reverence. In the city, all knowing is ordered toward worship. There is no small comfort in the thought that the end is not merely survival. Noah survives the flood, yes. The remnant survives various devastations, yes. But Enoch's horizon stretches beyond endurance. It reaches toward communion healed. The goal of God is not to keep a few creatures breathing after catastrophe. It is to dwell with a people made fit for joy. And joy, in this tradition, is never careless. It has passed through judgment. This is why the city is so moving. It is not an untouched innocence, but an earned peace, earned not by human merit, but by divine faithfulness, through the long work of exposing, judging, preserving, and renewing. The gates stand open because God has done what human rulers never could. He has not merely suppressed evil for a season, he has answered it to the root. Many readers hear in this vision resonances with Zion restored, with Ezekiel's temple river, with Isaiah's peace, with the New Jerusalem of Revelation. One should let each text keep its own integrity, yet one may still notice the family resemblance. Scripture and ancient tradition alike refuse to grant evil the last image. The last image is ordered life in the presence of God. There is also a pastoral tenderness in Enoch seeing this at all. A man who has witnessed chambers of waiting, chained rebels, blood crying from the ground, corrupt powers disguised as shepherds, and a flood about to cleanse the earth might have been left crushed under severity. Instead, he is shown the end toward which severity serves. This does not dilute judgment, it justifies it. Fire is not adored for its own sake. It is precious only because it clears what destroys. Here, the righteous are no longer defined mainly by opposition. They are not simply those who refused the age, though they did. They are those brought into the age to come. That positive note matters. Too much moral discourse trains the faithful only to resist and never to desire rightly. Enoch City corrects that imbalance. The future is not emptiness after evil is removed. It is fullness under God. Can a tired generation believe that? It must, or its endurance will curdle into bitterness. Because there is a way to oppose darkness so long that one forgets light has texture. One keeps the rules, tells the truth, bears reproach, mourns corruption, and waits, yet inwardly begins to picture the final state only as the absence of pain. Enoch is given more than that. He is given beauty with structure, holiness with welcome, abundance without threat, centrality without tyranny, water that gives life instead of waters that destroy. The flood is not the final water. The spring is. Do not move past that too quickly. The spring is. At the center of all divine judgment lies the refusal to abandon delight to the wicked. God means his world to become inhabitable for the meek. He means worship to lose its rivals. He means the poor in spirit to stand without fear. He means every false gatekeeper to be removed from the gate. Enoch receives this not as private reward, but as legacy. His visions are larger than himself. They are given for the strengthening of those who come after, those who must live in the long middle where the city is promised and the beasts still roam. He is taken before the flood, before Israel, before exile, before empire, before many later fulfillments and failures. Yet his sight reaches over all of it, like a lamp set early in a dark corridor. And now, the corridor narrows. The script must return to the man himself, to his departure, to the line scripture leaves spare and tradition surrounds with wonder. He was not. He was not. When Genesis finishes with Enoch, it does not dramatize. That restraint is part of the holiness of the thing. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. No description of the hour, no weather report, no witness list, no cry from the household preserved for us. A man who had lived 300 years in the line of Adam after the birth of Methuselah, a man whose days totaled 365 years, is summed at the end by relation more than by duration. He walked. God took. The ancient tradition fills the silence with assent, holy company, songs of vindication, and continuing witness among the heavenly ones. Some communities treasured him as the exemplary seer, the heavenly scribe, the one taken from among men into a realm beyond ordinary death. The New Testament letter to the Hebrews says that by faith, Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death, and he was not found because God had taken him. However one arranges the details in doctrinal thought, the central note remains luminous and severe. A faithful life in a violent age did not end in disappearance into meaninglessness. God himself gathered it. There is a quiet reversal in that. The watchers descended by seizure and are bound. Enoch is taken by God and is at peace. The giants stamped their renown into the soil and vanished under judgment. Enoch left no empire and remains remembered wherever the faithful need proof that walking with God is not wasted. The wicked filled the earth with noise. His departure comes to us almost as silence. Such silence is not emptiness. It is completion without spectacle. One imagines the house afterward, rooms still there, tools still where he left them, family speaking his name with a tenderness sharpened by absence, Methuselah carrying not only his father's memory, but his father's warning. Noah growing up within a lineage that had already learned two difficult truths. God preserves a witness in corrupt generations, and he does not owe the world an endless delay. Enoch's legacy, then, is larger than mystery. It is moral clarity joined to hope. He stands at the crossing of several great themes: intimacy with God, judgment on rebellion, the corruption of forbidden grasping, the order of creation, the reality beyond death, the preservation of the righteous, the measuring of history, the exposure of false powers, and the promise of a renewed dwelling under divine peace. Yet if one asks what held these themes together in him, the answer is still startlingly simple. He walked with God. That phrase rescues the whole tradition from inflation. Enoch was not great because he accumulated visions. He was entrusted with visions because he had learned to walk. The man came before the marvel. The obedience came before the unveiling. The hidden companionship came before the public memory. There is a final tenderness here for those who live in delayed times. Enoch did not see every fulfillment he announced. He did not stand on Ararat after the waters fell. He did not live to watch Israel become a people. He did not see the later empires rise and crack, nor the long unfolding by which many readers connect his themes to later biblical hope. He died, or rather, was taken, inside promise, not after completion. Yet his life is not marked as unfinished in a tragic sense. It is marked as received. God took him before the flood, as if to say that divine faithfulness is not measured only by what a servant survives on earth, but also by how completely that servant belongs to him. And so his voice remains useful. When an age begins to praise its own transgression as progress, Enoch reminds us that boundaries are mercy. When power teaches violence and calls it necessity, he reminds us that blood is heard in heaven. When secret knowledge seduces the impatient, he reminds us that wisdom severed from obedience becomes poison. When delay makes judgment seem implausible, he reminds us that the Lord comes with his holy ones. When the righteous grow tired and imagine peace only as exhaustion ending, he reminds us of the city, the spring, the open gates. His story does not end with a slammed door. It ends with an echo. Walk with God while the age hurries toward ruin. Keep faith when renown belongs to the violent. Lift your face toward the order that has not broken. Enoch leaves the page the way some bells stop sounding in the air, but keeps sounding in the bones. Scripture closes the line quickly. Tradition lingers. Between them stands a witness, neither gaudy nor thin. A man in a darkening world. A scribe of judgment. A servant of order. A herald of the Holy One. A father in the old earth. A sign that the righteous are not lost between flood and promise. He was taken. The warning remained. The promise remained longer.